As some of you may know, I very recently came back from an early birthday trip to Copenhagen. Now, we selected Copenhagen for the food and for the architecture, but also for the yarn. I feel like Denmark and the Scandinavian countries in general are real kind of hives of knitting activity. So I was really eager to visit Denmark and check out the knitting scene there and maybe visit a few shops. We were only there for the weekend, so I didn't kind of go mad and go to 100 different shops, but I'm really happy with the yarn that I selected, and it was such a great experience to see some options and colourways that I'd never seen before in person. Nothing really beats having a walk around a city as beautiful as Copenhagen and then stopping in a cosy yarn shop. And the first place that we popped into was actually a recommendation by someone who follows me over on Instagram. So really big thank you, you know who you are if you're watching this. And this is a shop called Sommerfuglen. And oh my goodness, I have to say it's a good thing that I don't live near this yarn shop. Otherwise, I would just be in there all the time. They have the most wonderful selection of yarns and colours. The position of the shop is also really central, so it was great for us as we were already exploring a lot of the area that the shop was positioned in. Now, I went into Sommerfuglen with a very specific yarn in mind. This is a yarn that I had been coveting for ages and one that is used by all of my favourite designers like Petite Knit, My Favourite Things and Eggyo Knit. And this is from a brand called Hjelholt's Old Spindery, or Old Spindery. I'm so sorry, I know I'm absolutely messing up the pronunciation. I do find the Danish words very hard to pronounce, so you're just going to have to bear with me on this episode. And this is their Aran weight yarn, which is spun in Denmark and is a blend of Falklands merino and Gotland's wool. And one of the most gorgeous, rustic and just luscious yarns I've ever actually got my hands on. I love everything about the branding and just the vibe of this yarn. You can see that there is sort of a beautiful grey that shines through this lovely camel colour. And I did have a really hard time when I was in the shop actually settling on which one I wanted. Now, the ladies in the shop were kind enough to let me film some little clips for me to share with you, and I'll show you some of the other beautiful colours of this yarn. I went for that Aran weight, which is the Hansvak yarn, just because I wanted to have a yarn that I wouldn't need to hold with anything else. I was also very tempted by their fingering weight one, which I am definitely going to order in the future. If this is as beautiful when it's knit up as it is now that it's in its hank. I was very indecisive as I was sort of immediately drawn to some of the grey shades that I had seen knit up into some beautiful cabled jumpers on Instagram. However, I felt like I had quite a bit of grey already in my stash waiting to be knit. So I asked my boyfriend to help me narrow it down, and we finally settled on two colours, and he liked the lighter kind of sandy shade and I really adored this camel. I'm not completely sure when I'm going to knit it up yet, as it is feeling very, very hot in Italy. And this, of course, was another thing that was funny about visiting Copenhagen, is the weather is a lot more like it is sort of in England. So really, really windy. We did have bright, beautiful sunshine on that first day when we were walking around, and that kind of deceived us a bit, as I was thinking, oh, the weather here is really quite mild. But on the second day, we were being blown away by that wind. Luckily, no rain though, so I'm very happy about that. And yeah, in Sommerfuglen, I got myself the hanks of this beautiful yarn. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that should be the perfect amount to knit up a beautiful jumper. I know that Petite Knit uses this yarn quite a lot, and her Sonia sweater is one that I have considered making with this, just because I think that with a yarn this gorgeous and characterful, quite a simple design will really allow it to shine and really allow me to enjoy the kind of rustic and cozy quality of the wool. Now, for people who are interested in the specifics, in one of these you get 200 meters for 100 grams. So I have 1,200 meters, which should be just the right amount. And yeah, I really can't speak highly enough of Sommerfuglen. The women who worked in there were so friendly to me. They started speaking to me in Danish at first. I think maybe the blonde hair makes people think that I was from there. And they were just so helpful and so kind. I particularly loved the fact that everybody in there was in a gorgeous hand-knit jumper, and the selection that they have is just so curated and so beautiful. It really shows some of the best kind of like Danish and Scandinavian yarn offerings. I was particularly excited, obviously, to try this one out, but to also kind of have a feel of the Isiger yarns, which I have never actually knit with before, but are really high on my list to make something with. I have a few clips of some of their colours here, and I was really blown away by the superb quality of these yarns. It was also nice to see some Filcolana and some Sandnes garn, which they had in abundance, which are also two beautiful brands from here. Now, having got my beautiful yarn from Sommerfuglen, the next place on our list to visit was, of course, Knitting for Olive. Now, Sommerfuglen do stock Knitting for Olive, but I was really excited about kind of going to the place where it all began. Knitting for Olive are such a sensation in the knitting world. They have really taken over, I think, with their gorgeous designs and the superb quality of their yarn. I'm wearing a combination of their mohair and merino today in this lovely blue, so I am a huge fan, and I really wanted to visit the hub of the brand and see it for myself. So to get to Knitting for Olive, we grabbed a coffee and one of the most heavenly cinnamon rolls I've ever eaten, and then we got on the metro and we went to the neighbourhood that Knitting for Olive is in. The shop and the kind of headquarters of Knitting for Olive are a little bit outside the city centre, but when I visit new places, I actually really love to get out of that kind of touristy centre bit and see some of the slightly more residential or slightly more kind of outskirts sections. And yeah, the neighbourhood around Knitting for Olive was really sweet, and the sun was out, and it was just a really lovely walk. When we got to the shop, I did find it a little bit smaller than I anticipated. There is the shop section, and then there is their kind of, what I think is their offices or boutique kind of headquarters section. So we went into the shop, which is kind of one room with a little extension bit off the back. And the ladies in there allowed me to take a very short clip, as it was quite crowded in there for such a small space, but I did capture some of the beautiful colours that they had on offer. However, the yarn that I went into Knitting for Olive to purchase was just a few balls of their merino in this shade of black, which is called Licorice. And I love the fact that this is called Licorice, because one of the things that I brought home as a souvenir, as a quintessentially Danish thing, was some salted licorice, which I will show you a cutaway to now. I love licorice, so I was really happy to be somewhere with people who share my love of the snack, and we did stock up on quite a lot of different ones for me to munch kind of over the next few weeks. So yeah, this licorice yarn is in their merino, which is just such gorgeous soft and light and beautifully smooth fingering weight yarn. If you've seen my spring knits inspired by Pinterest video, you will have heard that I have plans to cast on a camisole by My Favourite Things. It's just the very classic kind of vest camisole. I will put a picture of it up for you here now with the number, as her numbering all of her things does make it kind of challenging for me to remember sort of offhand. But yeah, this yarn is going to make a beautiful, simple, classic kind of camisole vest that I think I will get tons and tons of wear out of in the summer. And I was very tempted to buy a few more balls of yarn when I was in the Knitting for Olive shop. However, I only had a tiny carry-on suitcase, so I was using it more as a chance to see some of the colourways I had never seen before and really get a sense of the feeling of some of their different yarns, as I've used their beautiful merino, their kid silk and also their cotton merino, but I've never had my hands kind of on their new recycled wool or their cashmere, both of which are really gorgeous and definitely options that I will consider for my future projects. When we left Knitting for Olive, we hopped on a bus and then we went for a really nice long walk through a park. And I really adore how Copenhagen has so many beautiful open spaces to walk through. Overall, I found it a city that is just so ideally suited for people who want to use public transport or who want to walk. Most of the time we did do like kind of 90% walking. I mean, we're very used to that because we don't have a car where we live over here because we live right in the centre. And it was just such a wonderful way to explore the city. Of course, when people think about Copenhagen, they envision the beautiful, colourful buildings, and I have plenty of footage of them to give you a sense of what it was like. And I was just really blown away because the city was more kind of picturesque and vibrant and fun than I could have even imagined. Later that evening, we went for a beautiful birthday meal at a lovely vegetarian kind of plant-based restaurant called Bela. That was my sort of special birthday treat. And then we went home quite early to wake up and go to one more crafty stop the next day. In the morning of our last day, we checked out the SMK Museum, and I was so happy to see so many pictures of women working on knitting. It's not very often that you experience kind of looking at art that features knitting, but it kind of goes to show how deeply ingrained I kind of feel it was in everything while I was in Denmark. I saw so many people wearing patterns that I could recognise on the streets, and so many very chic looking women cycling around with like a little petite knit scarf kind of casually hanging off their necks. It was just really cool, and I've never been somewhere that I could feel like knitting was such a kind of big thing, and there were so many people who were obviously wearing things that had been lovingly made for them. So yeah, these are some of the clips of the knitting ladies that we saw at the SMK, and after that we had a gorgeous lunch of smørrebrød, which is the open-faced rye sandwiches that are really popular. Afterwards, we popped into kind of a craft and home shop that doesn't exist in Italy at all, but I have been in one back in the UK, and that is Sostrene Grene. Again, bad pronunciation, I'm sorry. But I wanted to go in there as I had heard that in Denmark they actually have a lot of yarn in their shops and a lot of other craft supplies. So I went in just to check out what they actually had on offer. And if you happen to go past one of these, it's very cool to go in and check out what sort of crafting supplies they have, because they have so many things for kind of like painting, embroidery and kind of fibre art. And their selection of yarn really surprised me. They had some things that looked really sweet and some which were very vibrant and featured some kind of funky tweed. I was quite tempted, but they didn't completely match my kind of colour scheme that I have going on for spring and summer. So I just settled on getting a nice sturdy measuring tape that I needed to replace my old one, and these two lovely project bags. One which is for me, which is the perfect size for a very small knitting project on the go, and one which is for my mum, so she can also keep her knitting safe when she is travelling to work on the train. So that was the last stop on the crafty places that I wanted to check out. I did, however, visit one clothing shop that I want to mention, as it does relate to what I'm going to be knitting very, very soon, and that is Skal Studio. Some of you may have heard of the brand Skal Studio. It is a Copenhagen-based company that uses sustainable materials and is all about those kind of cool, neutral, minimal looks. and I have fallen completely in love with their knitwear. Now, to my delight, I learned that they actually sell patterns for a couple of their really iconic jumpers. Now, I have plans very soon to cast on the Magda sweater, which I think is so stunning. It's like a very classic cabled jumper in a fingering weight yarn. I need a huge amount of fingering weight yarn. I think it's about 2,000 meters, give or take, so I will have to keep my eyes open and find the exact right option for that. I'm thinking maybe of ordering the fingering weight of this brand just to try it out. I'll include a couple of images of the design here, and this to me, it just typifies what I loved about the brand when I first heard about them. So I was so happy to visit them in person and see some of the beautiful offerings that they had, also for spring and summer, and to actually feel some of their knits and feel the quality of the things that they make. So yeah, that about rounds up all of the lovely places that I had the pleasure of visiting in Copenhagen. I have to say without a doubt, it's one of my new favourite cities. It was so much fun, so easy to move around, and just a joy to visit. We walked all over the whole city, and I feel like we really covered a lot of ground. And I wanted to get this video out to you a bit sooner, but as you can hear, I'm a little bit congested because as soon as we came back, I did unfortunately get a cold. But I'm happy that I took some clips and I managed to take you along with me on this really special adventure in a new place. And I hope to see you again very soon. Bye!